Wise Child by Monica Furlong, Chapter 10, Rescue. The terror of falling through the air was swiftly followed by pain as I hit the stone floor with a shattering bump. I struck my head against the wall as I fell, and from what Coleman said later, I must have fainted for a few moments. As I fell, the lantern shot out of my hand and rolled away, leaving both of us in total darkness. When I came around, I was puzzled. I was not in my bed at home because I was cold and damp. There was a bad pain in my leg that made me groan. "Wise child," Coleman was saying frantically from above. "Are you all right?" My leg hurt so much that I wished I could faint again, but I knew that I must speak to Coleman. "My leg hurts terribly," I said. I could not remember quite how we had gotten into such a dreadful predicament, nor think clearly about what we had better do. I could think only of pain. For the next hour or two, I drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes in a sort of bad dream in which some huge animal was sitting on my leg, sometimes coming back to the reality in which I was lying at the bottom of this hole. What was it? An empty well? And Coleman was desperately trying to carry on a conversation with me. The cold bit into me until my teeth chattered. When strange sounds started echoing through the cavern, to Coleman's terror, and when eventually a yellow light shone through one of the many entrances to the big chamber, I did not know it. I only returned to consciousness when I heard a conversation going on overhead. Juniper's clear, cheerful voice comforting Coleman's scared and tearful one. The next thing I knew, Juniper and Coleman were kneeling beside me, spreading her cloak on the cold stone floor and easing it, oh so gently, underneath me. Even that was terribly painful, but I was soon warmed by its touch. By the light of her lantern, I could see that I was in a round chamber, like a room with no roof to it, a big hole dug in the floor of the big room above. A short flight of stairs passed downward from the upper room on the other side of the circle from me. Between me and the stairs was a sort of stone table with runnels down the side of it and a sort of trough around the bottom. Juniper had taken a vial from the basket she carried, and she held it to my lips. "This will ease the pain, wise child," she said. For once I did not argue or make a fuss, but drank it gratefully, longing for the pain to go. I lay back and groaned again. "Now," she said briskly, "if I show you how to get back to the waterfall, Coleman, do you think you could get back to the house by yourself?" "Of course," said Coleman sturdily, though he must have been scared. "You're not going to leave me," I wailed. "Just for a short while. I'll come straight back. Coleman, I want you to run straight to Cormac's house. Do you know where that is? Tell him what has happened and ask him to come and bring his ladder and some cloth we could use to attach Wise Child to it. We shall have to carry her back on it." "Down that tunnel where you crawl?" Coleman asked, horrified. "No, there's an easier way than that, but it's secret, and neither of you must tell anybody about that or anything else about the caves." I was very frightened during the time when both Juniper and Coleman left me. Juniper had lit a candle from the lantern and placed it beside me, but it flickered eerily, and I hated the high stone walls of my prison. Faces swam in and out of my vision. One of them, a woman's face with long red curls floating about it troubled me particularly because of its expression of contempt. Suddenly I remembered a piece of advice Juniper had given me one night when I was afraid of the dark in the barn as I milked Daisy. Make a ring around yourself. Ask Jesus to make it if you like. Then feel that you are quite safe within that ring, that is where you are protected. It had helped in the barn, and it helped now, as the warmth of Juniper's good warm cloak also helped. All the same, I was very glad to hear her voice when she returned. She came down the steps, squatted on a corner of the cloak, and lifted my head gently onto her lap. It's all my fault, I said, beginning to cry. And Coleman said it was his fault, she said, laughing. Juniper always managed to find something funny in even the most desperate situations. I'm sorry the pain's so bad, she said. Already, it's not quite so awful, I replied. We were silent for a few moments. Juniper's medicine had pulled me out of the strange floating feeling I had had before. Now I knew where I was all the time. What is this place? I asked her. We'll talk about it when we get home. Would it help if I told you a story? Yes, I said, mainly to please her. I could not imagine any story that would distract me from this horrible place and the pain in my leg. Very well then, she said. I will tell you about when I was a little girl. I had often begged her to tell me this story, but she had always refused. And now, when I was in too much pain to listen properly, she wanted to tell it. It turned out, however, that she was quite right. I was so fascinated by the story she told that some of the time, at least, I did forget my own troubles. Juniper had once been a little girl like me, only in Cornwall. She had been the daughter of a king, but had been kidnapped to Brittany, stolen away from her mother and father. Eventually, with Uni's help, she had found her way home again, but her old life had changed, and she had wanted to go and live with Uni and learn from her how to be a Doran. We were both silent for a little while when Juniper finished her story. It was extraordinary how the vivid picture of Cornwall and Brittany she had told me had lifted the weight of the dark and the cold, as the drink she had given me had eased the pain. She, I felt, had temporarily lost herself in that earlier world and had to be given time to return. She did so quite quickly. Cormac and Coleman should be here soon, she said with her usual cheery confidence. I must give you something to make you go to sleep, wise child. Otherwise, the pain of the journey will be bad. She felt in her basket again and produced another flask. This one had a black, earthy smell that struck my nostrils as soon as she removed the cork. Ugh, I said, but I dutifully took a big swig of it, though it made me shudder with horror. Good. I hate not being awake, I said. Trust me, she said, and of course I did. After that, I have only a very vague recollection of waking up once or twice with a bad twinge of pain when she and Cormac jerked the stretcher on the way home. At one point, to my surprise, we seemed to be out of doors, under a cloudy sky. Coleman told me later that having left the cavern, they descended by flights of stairs and then by a sharp decline into a long tunnel that eventually wound its way out by trees and scrub to a place quite near the village. There was a boulder placed against the entrance, which they had to push away. He was surprised no one in the village had ever told him about it, and Juniper, unusually for her, swore him once again never to speak of it except to me. By the time I was fully awake again, I was back in bed at home. The bone setter had come, and he and Juniper were talking of grinding up comfrey root, mixing it with water, and making a case to protect my broken leg. Juniper looked very tired, as well she might. For several days I was in a lot of pain, too much to want to talk or to feel bored. But gradually I began to feel better and to make Juniper spend many hours telling me stories or talking to me. "Aren't you angry with me?" I asked Juniper once. "It was very naughty of us to go into the cellar. It was wrong of me to leave it so that you could get into it so easily," she said. "But angry? No, I'm not. People do what they do when they do it. Being angry is usually a bit beside the point. What matters now is getting your leg well again, so that I don't have to do all the work." "Huh," I said. But as I lay there with my leg stuck in its case of comfrey, even weeding seemed like a delightful way of passing the time. "You're not like most grown-ups, are you?" "Not much," said Juniper cheerfully. "What goes on down there, down in the caves? I saw something really horrible on the wall there. The devil was... That was why I fell down the hole. I was so frightened." "They have a long history, those caves," Juniper began. "At one time, you know, people thought that if they didn't keep on the right side of the gods, if they didn't sacrifice animals, and maybe even people, there would be no harvest, no young animals, no nuts or berries, and everyone would starve. So they had rituals, as Dorans do, only theirs were to keep the gods pleased with them and on their side. They ate the sacrifice, and it was like eating God." "You only eat God in the Mass," I said. Juniper didn't answer, though I felt she disagreed. "Anyway, it was the devil I saw up there on the wall, and he was eating a person, a girl it was. They were trying to keep on the right side of the devil, too, or to get him on their side. There are people, you know, who are not trying to live in the rhythm, but just to control other people, to make them feel guilty or do what they want. Philin Priest often makes me feel guilty. He does, and I wish he didn't, but it's not him I mean. There are much worse people than Philin, who control other people with special sorts of spells." "Sorcerers, you mean?" "That sort of person. It doesn't matter what you call them. Once you start controlling other people, whatever your motive, you become a sort of sorcerer. Those people are not on the side of life, wise child, but they are powerful." It flickered uncomfortably in my mind that Maeve was a sorcerer kind of person, but I pushed the unwelcome thought away. "Is that why you are here? So that the sorcerers can't come back?" "Who knows? They won't if I can stop them." I lay on the cushions in front of the fire and thought this one out. I had another question for Juniper. "Juniper, are you terribly rich? My cousin said you had a whole treasure chamber full of precious stones in the caves under the house." Juniper hesitated. "Wise child, there are children in the village starving at this very moment. Do you think I would keep rooms full of precious stones if I could feed them?" I had never thought of that. It would have been lovely, I said wistfully, to pick up great handfuls of diamonds and rubies and pearls and let them run through my fingers. Juniper laughed. There are places like that in the East, the jewel chambers of emperors and kings. Perhaps one day we will travel and see them together. I lay contentedly on my pillows, dreaming of sparkling stones and milky pearls.